Hey guys, it's me, your host, the J-Man. Welcome to my video. And today I'm going to do my take, or my quick take on the X-Men. I'm going to be talking a little bit about X-Men, kind of an overview of how I perceive and view the X-Men. Now, first of all, I'll give you a little introduction. I've been a fan of the X-Men for a really long time. Okay, dating way back to when I was just a little kid. I remember when I was in like elementary school and stuff. As a boy, I was really drawn to superheroes. Wherever I went, if I happened to see a picture of a superhero, I was like, wow, that's so cool. You know, it's something that you look up to. You're like, I want to be just like that when I grow up. Or, you know, it's very eye-catching because, you know, guys with, you know, big muscles and they're like, you know, flying through the air. Of course, as a child, you dream about stuff like that. You dream about flying. You dream about having superpowers. And so naturally, I was very drawn to superheroes. And most of the mainstream characters were Batman and Superman, and that was it. I mean, very rarely did you ever see anything else. Like, you go out, like, I grew up in the 80s, you know, mid-80s, so wherever I went, you didn't very often see Spider-Man or, you know, what other characters, the Hulk. You would rarely see those characters even. It was pretty much just Batman and Superman. So that was like a template of what I thought a superhero was. You know, and you look at Superman, and it's usually he's flying through the air. He looks really strong. And you go, okay, well, what's so great about Superman? Well, he's really, really strong, and he can fly. And just like every other superhero, you know, he might have a few other powers, but you never really knew that. But you liked him anyway. It didn't matter. You liked him anyway. And then you looked at Batman, and you're like, okay, well, he's pretty cool looking too. The only difference is he wears blue and gray, and he's got, you know, horns on his head, because you really didn't know what the difference is. And you thought, well, they both have a cape. Obviously, Batman can fly. Why else would he have a cape? And then when you suddenly found out, oh, Batman can't fly, it was like a big, you know, revelation to you. And as a young, impressionable child, it was hard to deal with, like, oh, how come Superman can fly but Batman can't? You know, you didn't really understand the characters, but you still had that strong interest in them. And so as you grow up, your curiosity develops more and more, and you want to learn about these characters. And so that's how it went for me. But then eventually I got interested in toy collection, and there are a lot of cool toys out there. I remember the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in particular really, really got my attention, excited me. I had a big collection of those. And those were the hot toy items in 1980. Probably around 1985 when they really, I don't know about 85, probably around 88, 89. But going into the 90s, the X-Men suddenly had a surge in popularity. Like, I had never heard of X-Men before in my entire life. I had no idea what they were. Alright, but it was obvious to me that they were superheroes. And, you know, I saw that they were coming out with a new toy line, this new toy line of X-Men toys. They looked really cool. It was like, wow, these are so neat. And so that led to my curiosity about the X-Men. Who are the X-Men? What are the X-Men? Okay, I didn't really read things as a kid. You know, as a boy, you didn't really have the patience, you know, the attention to devote to reading. And plus, your vocabulary and your knowledge is very limited, so it's all very confusing to you. So I was kind of geared away towards comic books, and you know, from other people. Basically, comic books had a bad rap back in the 80s. You know, if parents saw their children looking or reading at comic books, they would kind of try to deter the child from looking at them and say that stuff is trash. You shouldn't look at that. You know, just because they thought it was vulgar. You know, comic books just really had a bad rap, and so I really didn't read any comic books at all. But what caught my attention was the animated television show. Okay, in 1994, the X-Men television show debuted, and it was like right there along with the Iron Man show, but I never saw the Iron Man show. X-Men was on Saturday mornings. It was new, it was hot, and it was cool because, you know, here are these characters. There's more than one superhero here. It's not just Batman versus the villain, you know. Of course, I had seen that cheesy live-action Batman show with Adam West back in, you know, well, they played the reruns in the 80s. But I had seen that, you know. That was cool. I liked that. But this was really awesome because I was devoted to cartoons, man. I was a cartoonaholic. So then you got X-Men as a cartoon. I was all about it, and the tie-ins with the toy line and the Pizza Hut tie-in. I remember the Pizza Hut tie-in was really big. You could go to Pizza Hut, order a personal pan pizza, and it came with an X-Men comic book, and there was like 4 or 5 in the series. So I had like this burning desire to collect all of them. And even though I collected the comic books, I mean, I didn't really read them. I just kind of looked at them, you know. I still didn't have the patience or interest to read the comic and really understand what was going on. But I was geared toward sitting in front of the television and really listening and hearing what the X-Men were saying and what they were doing. And the storylines on the television show were really good. I mean, they explained the characters, they gave them personalities. This was all new stuff to me. This was all like, you know, I'd never experienced hearing about or learning about superheroes with this kind of depth and personality. So that was awesome, and that's what attracted me to X-Men. I became a huge X-Men fan from that point on, and eventually I did start picking up the comics and reading them. But so there you have. That's my background of how I became an X-Men fan and why I'm such a big X-Men fan. It wasn't until a couple years later that I really got hooked on Spider-Man. But so X-Men's my first true love when it comes to comic books. But now that I've studied X-Men really well, this is how I see it. I break it down like this. You have the X-Men, which is a very large team, a very large group of characters. Pretty much always at the helm is Professor X, okay? So you have that very large group of characters and personalities that, you know, range from high to low and in between. So there's a lot of fiction, a lot of stories and depth there. So it can get really confusing. So you kind of have to categorize it in your head, and that's the way I do it. And I see the X-Men as in different categories of the X-Men because it's such a huge overview. Most stories go like this. They're either about the X-Men. How should I say this? Okay. It usually depends on the villain. If the villain is going to be someone big, if it's going to be a big epic storyline, it's usually going to be Apocalypse. Apocalypse, to me at least, is pretty much the biggest, baddest X-Men villain. All right, overall. So any stories that have to do with Apocalypse is naturally going to also include Mr. Sinister, because Mr. Sinister is a product of Apocalypse. Basically, Sinister's powers came from Apocalypse. So Sinister is in servitude to Apocalypse. So any of those stories that involve Apocalypse are going to have elements of sci-fi, technology, time travel, cloning, genetics, things like that. Well, genetics is usually an ongoing theme in X-Men because the evolution of the human body is what turned them into mutants. But more so in the Apocalypse stories. So Apocalypse is really responsible for a whole lot of things that happen in the X-Men universe, including the introduction of Cable and X-Man Nate Gray, 2 major characters. Also Archangel, Mr. Sinister, like I've already said. So Apocalypse is really one of the most important villains and characters in the X-Men universe. Other than that, of course, we have Magneto, the arch rival of Professor X. And there's a lot of stories about him. Usually those stories are political by nature because Magneto is a political figure. He always has an agenda that involves him coming to power and authority. So you have the Apocalypse stories, you have the Magneto stories, then you have these stories that are set in the Savage Land, and those stories are usually about survival of the fittest type of thing. X-Men versus Sauron. Is that, Sauron's a pterodactyl. If you don't know who Sauron is, he's basically a dinosaur that can mesmerize you with his eyes. And so you have those stories that take place in the Savage Land include Sauron, Garrock, Zaladane, people like that. Okay, well that's another category. That's two categories of stories. Then you also have stories that involve Mojo, a Mojo world, which is a completely other category there. Which a lot of that is satire and parody. Okay. Then with the X-Men, you also have stories that involve alternate realities, like Days of the Future Past and Age of Apocalypse. Those are probably the two most popular. But that always includes time travel, and sometimes that relates to Apocalypse and Bishop and Cable and characters from the future. But that's another type of story. So you got all those different categories of X-Men stories. And that's how I see it, a very clear separation. So that's just how I break down X-Men stories in my mind. Maybe you guys see it differently. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but go ahead and shoot me your message or your comments, and I look forward to hearing from you. So thanks for watching my video, and see you next time.